And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello and welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on Thursday, August 7th, 2025. We start with the state of the sea ice. The ice has retreated all the way up into the Arctic Ocean, and it's still a little bit of ice along areas of the Beaufort Sea coast between Utqiagvik and around Dead Horse. But the slow melt-off will continue, even though we are going to see some cooler air begin to head southeastward from out of the Arctic Ocean, eastern Russia, and crossing the Chukchi Sea Friday and into Saturday. This is going to bring cooler temperatures along the west coast and into the western interior as we head through the early weekend. And as far as on the satellite image, this Thursday mid-afternoon, we have an occluded front pushing north up toward the Kenai Peninsula into the northern Gulf and just offshore of the Panhandle. Area of low pressure kind of down here between Dutch Harbor and Sand Point. That low is just going to kind of open up and wash out. It's going to wait for a second low, come up out of the North Pacific into the Western Gulf Saturday into Saturday evening, and that's going to bring yet another moist front that has an atmospheric river component that will bring some heavier rainfall, especially to the southern two-thirds of the Panhandle. Saturday night into early Sunday morning, 1 to 3 inch rainfall amounts. Locally, up to 4 inches possible where you have some terrain enhancement to the rainfall due to orographic lift. And then in the wake, this system moves up in the Gulf. We have a low that'll take shape here in the northwestern interior, and that'll gradually work its way east and draw down cooler air through the Bering Strait and along the west side of the state, kind of introducing the hints of an early fall pattern across the mainland as we head through the weekend into next week. So on the weather map for Friday afternoon, the first front, the one of today, is going to wash out and just into a trough with some lingering showers. Rain won't be quite as heavy, and nor will it. The gale force winds should subside that we've experienced Wednesday into earlier today. This system, though, is quite moist, and that's going to pull up into the western half of the Gulf with the front taking aim at the Panhandle with that atmospheric river later Saturday into Saturday night. Meanwhile, the stationary front here across south of the Brooks Range, low pressure forming, and then cooler air will begin to head southeastward across eastern Russia, lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, and that'll begin to cool temperatures down again north and western mainland. For Saturday, the low approaching the Gulf, east-southeast of Kodiak Island Saturday afternoon with this front. Some breezy conditions, especially along the southern part of the outer coast of the Panhandle, and the rain will increase in intensity as we go through the day Saturday, especially by Saturday evening and in the overnight hours of Saturday night into the pre-dawn of Sunday morning. Back to the north and west, the cooler air will continue southeastward across at least the northwest half of the mainland. Still a little warmer temperatures possible, though, over the eastern mainland here for even into the day Saturday, and by Sunday things should start to cool down a bit. But looking at winds Friday for the inner channels, 20 knot southeast winds, gust as high as 35 knots, Lynn Canal, waves building 3-4 feet there, and generally 3-4, even 5-foot waves down toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla, as well as Stevens Passage. And for the outer coast, winds not quite as strong. Southerly winds generally 10 to 15 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. Saturday, though, as that next front comes in with the rain, you're going to see winds picking up along the outer coast. Inner channels, look for southeast to south winds 20 to 25 knots with waves 3-4 feet there in Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, 4 or 5 feet down here toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Off of Craig, outside of Port Alexander, south winds 25 to 30 knots, and then those winds are going to turn southeast to easterly from Sitka to out of Cross Sound and south of Yakutat Bay, 30-knot easterly winds with waves 9 to 10 feet. On Friday, across the northwestern Gulf, Cook Inlet, winds will have come down from what they were Wednesday and Thursday. Southeast winds, Prince William Sound, 15 knots, outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island, southeast winds 15 knots. Waves within Prince William Sound 2-3 feet, maybe 6 to 8 feet outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. Cook Inlet, northeast winds from Anchorage down to off of Anchorage Point, or Anchor Point, 10 to 15 knots with waves 3 to maybe as high as 4 feet there. And then easterly winds to 20 knots out of Homer and toward Kamishak Bay with waves running right around 4 feet. And on Saturday, winds will be northeasterly, 15 knots within Prince William Sound, 2 to 3 foot waves. Outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, look for east-northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, waves 8 to 10 feet. And then kind of a mixed bag of 15-knot winds going up Cook Inlet. Southeast winds, Kennedy Entrance, Kamishak Bay, with waves running a few feet. West winds 15 knots north of Anchor Point, becoming southwesterly up toward Anchorage, Turnagain Arm, with waves 2 to 3 feet on Saturday. And then in the vicinity of Kodiak Island on Friday, kind of a mixed bag of winds. Generally east wind Shelikof Strait 15 knots, east winds 10 knots Bristol Bay, but otherwise variable winds around 10 knots off of Kodiak City, Akiak, Port Huyton, and Chicknick, as well as Perryville. Those winds turn northerly as you get down Sandpoint, Cold Bay to Falls Pass at about 15 knots, with waves 3 feet on the Bering side, 5 feet on the North Pacific side. And then generally speaking, Saturday winds are going to be northwesterly 15 to 20 knots across the region from Kodiak City all the way down to Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Waves 5-6 feet on the North Pacific side and 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. For Friday, the Aleutians generally uniform northwest winds near 20 knots, so having come down from the breezier systems earlier in the week. And then on Saturday, look for northwest to north winds around 15 to 20 knots on Alaska through Nikolsky, Atka to Adak. But you get west of Adak on Saturday, winds are going to go southwest to south 20 to 25 knots, strongest there 25 knots, Kiska to Shemya. And then along the southwest coast, northeast winds to 10 knots out of Bristol Bay on Friday, northwest winds 10 knots within Kuskokwim Bay at 10 knots. St. Matthew down to the Pribilof, St. Paul, St. George, northwest winds of 20 knots, waves right around 4 or 5 feet. And then the cold front's going to be coming down from the north and west, so keep that in mind. Winds will be picking up later Friday and certainly for Saturday, lower Yukon, Delta, and Norton Sound. So north to northwest winds 10 knots there, 3 to maybe 4 foot waves Friday, but notice come Saturday, winds increase across the region because of that front pushing further southeastward. So in the wake of the front, northwest winds, Norton Sound, lower Yukon coast, 20 to 25 knots, 5 to 6 foot waves. Ahead of the front, westerly winds 20, 25 knots there into Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, and just 15-knot northwest winds back toward St. Paul and St. George. Now coming through the Bering Strait Friday, as that front does accelerate southeastward and the cooler air begins to pool down south through there, lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, west side of the Seward Peninsula, north winds to 30 knots and waves running about 6 feet. So definitely more hazardous conditions there. On Friday, as we go up north along the Chukchi Sea coast, look for north winds turning northeast at 20 knots until you get from Utqiagvik to Kaktovik, easterly winds of 10 knots, with waves running generally just a couple of feet. And then for Saturday, up along the Beaufort Sea coast, 5 to 10 knot winds Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay, but look for northeast winds 15 knots, Utqiagvik to Wainwright. And once you get around Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, north winds accelerating to 25 knots, turning a bit northwesterly towards Shishmaref. Waves across the lower Chukchi Sea 5 to 7 feet, especially through the Bering Strait. And then the west side of the Seward Peninsula, including Wales, Port Clarence, and on over to the north side of St. Lawrence Island on Saturday, we have north winds at 25 knots with waves running 5 feet or so. So again, more in the way of some hazardous conditions to smaller craft.